So, as I always start off with all my stories, I always tell people that, I am what they call a trouble starter. I just am. I've been that way since I was a child, and that's just, how it is. So, if anybody be wondering, why making stories I always start off that way with whatever, trauma, stuff like that. That's why. Now, as I was saying, so I can tell y'all, it was a day, you know what I'm saying, pretty much like any other day. I was always the one getting in trouble, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, because I was a trouble starter, you know what I'm saying? I had the big mouth. I was the one that was, outspoken. I was the one that, you know what I'm saying? If some trouble was to be getting into, or to be got into, or to be ran into, or to be ran from, well, chances is, the name Noonie rung in that, and that's me, Noonie. It rung up in there. But, so like I said, I do understand why, I was, the one I was, being picked on and being the one that was, in trouble all the time. But on this particular, it's something about a child that, stay getting into it or stay getting in trouble, you know what I'm saying, by their mom. It make their mom or make their child, feel some type of way. So, my mom was tired of me, I was study getting in trouble, study doing things, study talking bad, you know. Yeah, I had my ways, I was even had my other sisters getting in trouble with me. And on this particular day, she had pretty much snapped like she usually do. She was calling me dumb. She was calling me stupid. I was pregnant. She was telling me how I wasn't gonna be nothing and how I wasn't gonna have nothing. And of course, I was feeling some type of way because, even though I was a child and I was at the point of, making mistakes and not knowing about, you know what I'm saying, about life. You know what I'm saying? So I was, instead of being able, she wasn't always the type of mother that I could speak to. So because she wasn't always the type of mother that I could speak to, then, I would just, go ahead on and, act out as most children do. But as I said, this day, it was a pretty rough day because, my mom, she would always, call me names in front of all my sisters, all my kinfolk, all my cousins, all my brothers, all my nieces, all my nephews. I'm like, good Lord, woman, can you give me a chance? It wasn't nobody who was off limits. Anybody that come in the house, they needed to know that I was the child that was going to be the troublemaker. And I was the one that was going to have some trouble going on. And like I said, that day wasn't like, it was like any other day. You know what I'm saying? It was very seldom days that I would have days where I wouldn't be called out of my name. You know what I'm saying? I talked about and all that type of stuff there. So I just, for whatever reason, like I said, I just couldn't get it right. So since I looked at it like this, since my mama always called me the dumb child, I always just proceeded to go ahead on and act like her. Might as well go on head on wear the strings and go on head on wear the jacket. Go on head on put the whole clown suit on. If you're going to call me a clown, then I might as well go on head on act like one. Mama, I ain't want to, prove her wrong or nothing. Now, I know some people may look at that and say, why would you go off and do that, me? Because that's just too much.